Throughout the history of our nation's westward expansion, civilization has followed the winding courses of the rivers and the streams as if they were the superhighways of our pioneer days. Since the earliest visits of the French explorers and trappers, the Missouri River has played a vital role in the economic development of the state of Missouri and westward states in the Louisiana Purchase. An early map of Missouri by Anthony Finley, dated 1826, notes the location and boundaries of the early counties forming in the state along the Missouri River. These counties include St. Louis, St. Charles, Franklin, Montgomery, Gasconade, Callaway, Cole, Boone, Cooper, Howard, Sheraton, Saline, Lilliard, and others. The counties and their borders are not as we know them today, since there were 49 changes to the map of Missouri throughout the course of the formation of these counties. Along the banks of the Missouri River, small but important communities were being established at favorable river landings along the course of the river. These early important communities include St. Louis, St. Charles, Marthasville, La Charrette, Pinckney, Cote Sandison, Jefferson City, Marion, Booneville, Franklin, Sheraton, Jefferson, and other points to the west. Lesser landings also noted include Missouri, Mexico, Alexandria, Hibernia, Nashville, and Providence. These river landing communities became the stepping-off point for the myriad of settlers that came to Missouri and points westward by keelboat and later by steamboat. Although landings along the Osage River and Osage River steamers were not deeply involved in the westward migration of settlers and movement of commerce to the west, a strong dependence upon the steamboat developed to support more local commerce and the development of local infrastructure. The counties surrounding the Osage River were more remote than those along the Missouri River. It was this remoteness that led to the later construction of railroads, bridges, and roads in the development of Missouri. As a result of the remoteness, these counties became more dependent upon the steamboat for commerce and transportation, and that dependence persisted into the 19th and 20th centuries. It is this continued dependence upon the steamboat that has left us with a legacy of steamboat photos and histories from the area and from their focus on the river. In this section, we will attempt to document the steamboats, steamboat landings, and people involved in the commerce on the Osage River. The Osage River is formed by the confluence of the Little Osage and the Marias de Sines rivers and is the largest tributary of the Missouri River in the state. Originating in eastern Kansas, it flows easterly for more than 300 miles before emptying into the Missouri River a short distance below Jefferson City. Steamboats began plying the Missouri River in 1819. But it wasn't until 1837 that an attempt to navigate the Osage River by the steamer American, a small side-wheeler chartered by a group of St. Louis businessmen. The boat left St. Louis in April 1837, venturing approximately 100 miles up the Osage River to near what is now Tuscumbia in Miller County, before returning to St. Louis with no notable problems. The second boat attempt to navigate the Osage wasn't so fortunate. The owners of a boat called the North St. Louis started up the river the last week of July in 1837, the driest time of the year, when the water levels were at their lowest. They intended to go as far as Osceola, but their trip came to an abrupt end about 50 miles or so above the mouth of the river when the boat ran aground on a gravel bar. The river level fell so fast that they were soon sitting high and dry, 6 feet out of the water. Having no way to refloat the boat, the owners were forced to leave it there through the winter until spring rains brought water levels up to enough to float it off. Needless to say, there's no record of the North St. Louis ever venturing up the Osage again. The points of interest as they occur along the Osage River from the mouth of the Missouri River to approximately Henley are as follows. Osage River mouth, the original mouth of the Osage River, which is now closed, the railroad bridge along the Mopac, Osage City, Lyletown, Huber's Ferry, Broker's Landing, Shipley's Shoal, Prince Shoal and Island, Rice Shoal, Castle Rock, Bolton Shoal, Lockett's Shoal, Courtwright's Island and Shoal, Bloody Island, Harrington's Landing, Holderman's Landing, Miller's Landing, Summers Landing, Edwards Mill, Round Bottom Shoal, Dixon Shoal, Hanson's Ferry at Osage Bluff, Hecker Landing, and the railroad bridge for the Chicago and Rhode Island. The points of interest along the Osage River as we proceed upriver from approximately Henley to Warsaw, Missouri are as follows. Railroad Bridge, Chicago and Rhode Island, Tavern Creek, Cap's Landing, Coon Creek Island, Berry Island, Little Tavern Creek, Tuscumbia Landing, Bear Creek, Cotton Island, Bell Island, Bagnall Landing, Lynn Creek, Gravois Mill, and Warsaw Landing. Because of the shoals and tight bends in the river, Osage River steamboats were necessarily smaller and had shallower drafts than the steamboats operating on the Missouri River. Some plied all the way to St. Louis and back, and others transferred shipments from the larger Missouri River boats at the mouth of the Osage. Among the pre-Civil War steamboats operating on the Osage were the Osage Packet, Alliance, Wave, Warsaw, Chippewa, Laclede, Leander, Mary C., Financier, Thomas E. Tutt, Flora Jones, T.L. Crawford, Maid of Osage, and the Mansfield. Among the steamboats plying the Osage River after the Civil War were the Alice Gray, Emma, Tom Stevens, Golden Gate, Evening Star, Far West, General Meade, Aggie, Dan B. Hurlbut, Plattsmouth, John R. Hugo, Frederick, Nadine, Sport, Helga, Thomas H. Benton, J. R. Wells, Tuscumbia, Dauntless, Floyd, and the Homer C. Wright. A little later in the history of steamboating on the Osage River came such steamboats as the Thomas H. Benton, the Helena, and the Golden Gate, all big boats. Possibly the largest and most palatial of all boats landing at Tuscumbia was the Golden Gate. The boat was 260 feet long and was a four-decker. Above the lower deck was a cabin for the laborers. Above this was the Texas, or rooms for the officers, and still above this was the pilot house. The boat was a veritable floating mansion. Those big boats made an inspiring sight at night on the river, with lights aglow and the smoke belching from the smokestacks. The big whistles on such boats cannot be forgotten once they've been heard. The steamer J.W. Spencer is known to have provided ferry service on the Missouri River between Jefferson City and the ferry landing on the Callaway County shore for approximately a decade before the construction of the first bridge across the Missouri River at that location. The steamer Spencer was a side-wheeler, 131 feet long by 35 feet wide, with 5-foot draft. It was built in the Howard Yards in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and launched in 1882. The steamer J.W. Spencer is shown in a glass plate negative photo taken by Jefferson City photographer B.F. Oliver. The photo is thought to be the last trip for the Spencer in the Jefferson City area, occurring on the day of the dedication of the first bridge at Jefferson City. The ferry is thought to be banked on the Callaway County shore near the current soccer fields south of Highway 63, and the water tower and a smokestack in Jefferson City Mill Bottom appears in the skyline at the left side of the photo. Appearing is a collage of clips from the B.F. Oliver photograph of people from the area in their Sunday finest participating in that very special event. The steamer J.R. Wells, whose home port was at Tuscumbia on the Osage River in Miller County, is pictured at the Jefferson City Steam Ferry Landing. The steamer Wells was the service boat of Anchor Milling Company of Tuscumbia, and the old bridge can be seen in the background with its main span rotated open for river traffic. Horse and buggy traffic can be seen on the stationary span to the north, awaiting closing of the main span. The photo is obviously prior to 1935, when the bridge was acquired by the Missouri Highway Department, and the control building on the side of the bridge was relocated to the superstructure of the main span. The Helena was a stern-wheeled, wooden-hull packet steamer, 194 feet in length, 33 feet in beam, and 4.5 feet in draft. It was launched in 1878 in California, Pennsylvania, and destroyed in 1891, where it was snagged at Bonham Island on the Missouri River. The Helena was among steamboats plying the Osage and occasionally the Missouri River after the Civil War. This group included the following steamers: the Alice Gray, Emma, Tom Stevens, Golden Gate, Evening Star, Far West, General Meade, Aggie, Dan B. Hurlbut, Plattsmouth, John R. Hugo, Frederick, Nadine, Sport, Thomas H. Benton, J.R. Wells, Tuscumbia, Dauntless, Floyd, and the Homer C. Wright. Wheat, livestock, lumber, railroad ties, farm produce, merchandise, lead, and tiff were the principal commodities of commerce. After the establishment of railroad service through Missouri, navigation by steamboats dropped off sharply. However, the continued presence of these remaining steamers were a significant factor in regulating the cost of transportation on competing rail lines. Little is known about the steamer David Tipton other than it was originally launched in 1900 under the name Colonel A. Mackenzie. From the photo, it is apparent that it is a side-wheeler of medium size with sufficient space for commerce and spacious accommodations for passenger service. It probably was engaged in packet service and medium-distant commerce. The steamer John L. Ferguson was a wooden-hull, recessed-wheel steamer built primarily for local trade and for use as a ferry boat on the Missouri River. It was built in 1876 at Grafton, Illinois, and operated primarily at St. Charles until it was destroyed in 1886. Although the steamer John L. Ferguson is indicated by records to have operated at St. Charles, the boat owner and namesake lived near Tebbets, Missouri, in South Callaway County, and owned and operated Ferguson's Landing, just east of Bonnet's Mill in Osage County. The sign on the following slide indicates the Ferguson was out of St. Louis, Missouri. The steamer John L. Ferguson was a rather unique steamboat in that it had a recessed drive wheel located amidships and was not readily observable. This arrangement was referred to as a tunnel boat and afforded some degree of protection to the drive wheels from damage of floating objects or accidents when docking. Maneuverability did suffer somewhat. This is an early photo of the steamer Wallow at Portland in 1929. It is not known where or when the Wallow was constructed. However, it was known to have provided support for the sand and gravel operation on the North Shore across from Jefferson City, as well as other duties on the Missouri River in the Jefferson City area. The Wallow is known to have operated in this area as late as the mid-1950s. Boats of the 1870s included the Alice Gray, Phil Chappell, Tom Stevens, Evening Star, General Meade, Gee Whiz, Black Hills, George Spangler, Aggie, and Far West. In the 1880s, the Georgie Lee, the Aggie, the H.C. Coleman, the Plattsmouth, the James Watson, the Sport, and the Emma are mentioned as being engaged in the traffic on the Osage River. The Georgie Lee was a side-wheeler and drew about 15 inches of water. She was in the charge of Captain Henry Baker. The H.C. Coleman, laden with merchandise for Tuscumbia merchants, arrived here from Jefferson City within 24 hours of leaving the capital city. The Black Diamond, the Aggie, and the Hurlbird were also among the boats navigating the Osage River in the 80s. The Aggie was a towboat equipped with 2 boilers, and she was in the charge of Captain Roby. The Osage River had one steamer which was built exclusively for carrying the mail from Jefferson City to Tuscumbia. This boat was built by Philip Chappell, then State Treasurer, and others of Jefferson City as a corporation. The boat was built in 1881 and christened the Tuscumbia. It began carrying mail in the spring of 1881 as an experiment. The boat was 90 feet long and 18 feet wide and had only one deck. A 2-foot gangway extended along the side of the cabin. The mail schedule called for departure of the boat from Jefferson City at 6 a.m. to arrive at Tuscumbia at 6 p.m., the distance by river being about 75 miles. In 1882, Captain William H. Hohenstein, who was engaged in the mercantile business at Tuscumbia with his father, William Hohenstein, built the steamer Frederick, primarily to haul their freight from Osage City and to deliver produce to the railroad. The boat was built in 1882 near Ralph Wells' home. The Frederick was 100 feet long and 14 feet wide. In 1898, the Anchor Milling Company, desiring to expand its business, began construction of a boat at Tuscumbia to be 110 feet long with a 20-foot beam. The boat became named as the J.R. Wells, so named after one of the principal stockholders of the Anchor Milling Company. The Ruth, another boat built by J.R. Wells, was operated in traffic by Anchor Milling Company. The Anchor Milling Company disposed of the J.R. Wells to Missouri River interests and later built the Homer C. Wright, which was used in hauling wheat from various points along the Osage River to the flour mills at Tuscumbia and also to the railroad. The boat did general freighting business, handling quite a lot of livestock. Navigation on the Osage River was at its height during the last 2 decades of the 19th century and the first decade of the 20th century, due largely to channel improvements, but there were still obstacles to face. The memories of Captain Robert M. Marshall, Henry Castrop, C.B. Wright document the day-to-day difficulties faced by rivermen of the era. These pilots operated on routes out of Osage City, Lynn Creek, and Tuscumbia to as many as 16 communities and 50 landings between the mouth and Roscoe, 238 miles upstream. They also hauled shipments to and from ports as far away as St. Louis. The photo depicts the construction of the Chicago and Rock Island Railroad Bridge in 1903, which crosses the Osage River at a point called Hecker near the present community of Henley. Ironically, the steamer Frederick was shown assisting the construction of the railroad bridge. It was the competition from the railroad and roads and bridges that brought about the demise of the steamboat traffic on the Osage River. This photo depicts the Chicago and Rock Island Railroad Bridge in a later stage of construction, with the steamers Peerless and J.R. Wells assisting in the construction of the bridge. Shown also are several barges used for moving men and materials used in the construction, and on the rails above, an engine and a railroad crane used to set the steel in the superstructure of the bridge. Union Electric completed construction of Bagnell Dam in 1931, effectively ending steamboat navigation on the Osage River except for a small amount of trade from Tuscumbia to the mouth. The lock and dam ceased operating in September 1951, and the property, which included 12 residential, operational, and maintenance buildings, was sold to a private concern on April 1, 1960 for $10,500. Thus closing steamboating era on the Osage River.